Oprah, Elon Musk. Two of the most recognizable names on the planet share something else in common. They've used weight loss drugs.
This medication has helped me tremendously.
Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro. It's rare prescription drugs become household names. Doctors describing them as breakthrough treatment for severe obesity and for just getting rid of those stubborn pounds. But who has access to them? And at what cost to both your bank account and your body?
It was only approved in 2022, and by 2023, it's our #1 drug.
State officials voting this year to stop covering weight loss drugs, or the state health plan could run out of money. Tonight on The Record, we talk to top weight management doctors and people who've used the drugs about a trend taking the country by storm. And thank you for joining us for On the Record tonight. I'm Lena Tillett. Revolutionary, extraordinary, out of reach. Some of the ways a new class of medications to treat obesity is being described. Our panel tonight will bring the facts and their experiences to help us understand this topic. Dr. Sarah Rowe is an obesity medicine physician and director of the UNC Physicians Network Weight Management Program. Dr. Nicole Swiner is a family physician based in Durham and a public speaker and advocate for women's health. Dr. Swiner also used Ozempic in her own weight loss journey. Dr. William Yancy is an internal medicine doctor at Duke Health and medical director of Duke's Lifestyle and Weight Management Center. And joining us via Zoom is Wendy Gant, who is sharing her experience using a weight loss drug after a lifelong struggle with weight. Thank you all so much for being with me tonight. Dr. Yancy, I'd like to begin with you because I want to start with the basics. Drugs prescribed for diabetics were found to induce major weight loss. Explain this discovery.
The medicines you're talking about are called GLP-1 agonists, and they mimic a hormone that's in our body called GLP-1, basically act like that hormone in the body. That hormone works primarily by causing the body to secrete insulin, but there are far-reaching effects in the body, and ones that were, I think, very surprising to people who are studying the drug. So it helps people to reduce their hunger. And those effects are thought to be in the brain. Originally, it was thought to work by slowing down digestion in the stomach, and that actually is true as well. So the stomach machinations, the movement in the stomach decrease, and so that slows down digestion as well. So those two effects seem to reduce, or do reduce, food intake, and people are able to lose weight that way.
Dr. Rowe, in our conversations, you have called GLP-1s, these weight loss drugs, revolutionary. Why do you say that?
We think this class of medication is a huge medical breakthrough. It's reshaping the field of medicine. It's reshaping pop culture. It's reshaping the global stock market. Experts believe that this class of drug is going to be the most prescribed drug in the history of medicine.
Why?
The weight loss effect, the excellent ways that it decreases the blood sugar, and latest studies show that it decreases the risk of heart attacks, it decreases the risk of strokes, and even it delays the progression of kidney disease in patients with diabetes. This is a wonderful drug.
I think it's confusing for some people because we know that diabetes has been an issue for a very long time. And yet it seems with these drugs that were prescribed for diabetics, all of a sudden we are also noticing that a side effect is major weight loss. I mean, how did that come to be, Dr. Yancy?
Well, I think another point to make here, and reason why they're so revolutionary, is because there's a large prevalence of obesity in the United States and the world. And so that means that this is a medication that could help a large number of individuals. In terms of how could it come to be, I think it was unexpected, to be honest with you. This was a medicine that was developed to lower blood sugar and did a great job of that. But at the same time, they noticed weight loss in individuals and started studying that. That was a second indication that the drug companies started looking at. Originally, it was designed for diabetes control.
Dr. Swiner, who qualifies for the drug? Is this based on body mass index? How can someone access the drug?
So it takes a kind of a personal and one-on-one meeting with your medical provider first. So people have been hearing about this stuff on TV, on the media, and social media, and they kind of come to the conclusion that yes, I want to try this medicine for whatever reason. But then the next step is having that discussion with your provider about the reasons why, about your medical history, things that you've tried and not tried, and the other things that you will do along with the medicine if you do happen to qualify. So that, there's one part of qualifying for it from a history standpoint, but then the insurance coverage qualifications and all that's a whole another issue.
Yeah, and I am going to get to the cost in a bit because that's obviously a major factor. I want to bring in Wendy Gant, who has been using weight loss drugs for months now. First Mounjaro, now Wegovy. Is that right, Wendy? Tell us how you first learned about the drugs and why you decided to use it.
Well, I began using the drugs Mounjaro back in August of 2022. And actually, I learned about it from social media. I was scrolling one evening on TikTok, and these women kept coming up talking about their weight loss Mounjaro journey and their stories. And their stories sounded like mine. And I did some research, and in a short period of time, I had access to the medications.
What did it immediately do for you?
What?
How did it impact you, Wendy?
Yes.
How did it impact you? What did the drugs do?
Well, for some people, the impact is not immediate. I will honestly say that within 12 hours of taking the drug, I took it on a Monday evening, and I woke up the next morning and felt different. I felt like it flipped a switch in my brain, and that constant food noise, that chatter to thinking about what am I going to eat? What snack should I have? What food should I have next? It was like a switch was flipped off, and I kept thinking all that day, this must be what normal people feel like in relation to food and satiety and hunger.
And can you share how much weight you've lost?
Approximately 50 pounds in the past year and a half since taking the medications.
Has your relationship to food changed?
Has what changed?
Your relationship to food changed? Yeah. Do you still enjoy it?
Well, I eat what I need for my body to fuel for energy, but I don't restrict. If I want to have a hamburger, I'm going to have one, but chances are I'm going to only eat a fraction of it. And that's very satisfying.
Dr. Swiner, you also decided to use Ozempic as part of your health journey. What went into that decision?
So the other thing that I wanted to bring up is that, this class of medicine, or the type of medicine that it is, the injections, go way back. So 8-10 years ago, we were hearing about things like Victoza and Saxenda, and then along the line came Ozempic and then Wegovy and all of that. Mm-hmm. But these types of medicines have been around for years. So in clinic, when I was in clinical practice, we were, the farm reps were coming in and telling us about all these wonderful medicines that were being prescribed for diabetes. They were seeing these wonderful benefits, but oh, by the way, people were also losing weight. So, I had kind of the firsthand information from the farm reps, and then I would take that to my patients. And then talking to my patients about it, and clearly, whether or not you have diabetes, because obesity is such an issue, people are very interested in, managing their weight. Myself, after having 2 kids and getting older, I was like, well, let's see. Right? Let's see because, like many women, I'd, been trying the diet, trying the exercise. Life gets in the way, work gets in the way. Right. We reach for the wrong things to eat, especially when you're in the office setting. And so adding something like that would help to literally, control my portion intake and control what literally feels like the size of your stomach. It helps you to control how much you're putting in. And then, of course, you have to do the other things to help keep it off. So this is, years ago that this trend was starting, and it's just becoming a major deal now.
Yeah, everyone now knows about it. Has it been effective for you? Can you say that?
It was. So, when I first tried, like I said, I tried some of the other ones just to kind of test and see, just so I could give my patients a real life, experience about how it helped me. When Ozempic first came out, I did try it for a little while. And when I was really consistent with it, it was, I guess 22 when it was kind of hitting the market. When I was really consistent with, my diet and exercise and, don't want to say diet, but, healthy choices and things that we're eating and doing those things for exercise and being consistent with that, it worked really well. Probably lost about 40 or so pounds. Over time, of course, and with changes of the insurance coverage, there were some gaps where either I couldn't get it or I had to wait a little bit or I had to switch to a different one. And that certainly, you'll see a little bit of rebound weight gain with that.
I did want to ask you that quickly, Dr. Rowe. If you stop using it, do you gain all the weight back? Do you gain it quickly? How does that work?
Yes, in clinical studies, if you stop the GLP-1 drugs, within 1 year, you gain about 80% of the weight back. But in the real world, in our clinical practice, many of our patients are taught what to eat. When they're on these medications, we really utilize that time to help them reestablish their relationship with food. So we teach them what foods to eat, and what I'm finding as a weight management physician is that they're much more able to adhere to some of these better food choices.
Right.
So my patients have not gained a lot of the weight back. So there is a physiologic changes, so they will gain some, but many of my patients are not gaining all the weight back.
Because it becomes a lifestyle change in addition to taking these weight loss drugs.
Absolutely, because we say this is not a diet, this is a lifestyle change.
Right. So much more to get to with this. Coming up, we're going to talk about access to these drugs, costs, and why the state says it can't cover it anymore for state employees. Welcome back to our discussion about breakthrough weight loss drugs. We've talked about the science behind it. Let's talk about the cost. I have been looking through a number of these weight loss drugs to see how much they are on the market and how much insurance companies generally cover it. Wegovy, about $1,350 per month. Less than $25, at least that's what Novo Nordisk says, for 80% of their patients if they're covered with insurance. Ozempic, it's about $1,000 a month, as low as $25 for insurance. Zepbound, about $1,000 a month. Coverage there varies. Mounjaro, $1,000 a month. Again, coverage there varies as well. So the cost, thinking about this is for a month of injectables, Dr. Yancy. Why are these drugs so expensive?
That's a good question. The medications take a lot of money to develop, and I'm sure that's a big part of the equation. The trials that need to be done to test these medications. First of all, you start in animals, then you move through animals to humans in small studies, and then you move to larger studies for looking at efficacy and safety, and then you have to do large-scale, thousands of patient trials to determine whether they're truly safe and effective, and to gather the data for the FDA to approve the medication. So that's costly. I'm sure that's a big part of it, the development. And for every medication that does make it to the approval by the FDA, there are many that don't make it there. And so the cost of those medications being developed is also part of that.
But is this a supply and demand issue at this point?
Well, one has to think that could have something to do with it as well. There's a huge demand for this medication. There's a difficulty that all of the pharmaceutical companies are having ramping up production of these medications. It's hard to keep up with the demand. So I think all of these are part of the equation.
Let's talk about the demand just in North Carolina. I want to go through what state officials say have happened in just 1 year in terms of interest for state employees under the state health plan. Last fall, we learned from state officials the popularity of the drugs exploded in a year. Looking at the numbers, weight loss drugs costing the state $102 million, the state health plan accounting for about 10% of all the state paid for prescriptions. That is incredible. The dime on every dollar is going to these weight loss drugs. At the start of last year, 5,000 state employees were using these drugs. By the end of last year, it moved up to $25,000. The state ultimately saying that they could not afford this, asking Novo Nordisk to give them an even bigger discount because right now they are under a rebate, and Novo Nordisk said that they could not do that. Ultimately, the state said if they continued with this current rate, that they would run out of money by 2026. So the state is no longer covering this for state employees. I wonder what impact that is having on even some of your patients, Dr. WRAL.
Yeah, so in our clinic, we're getting a lot of panic messages from our patients. Some of my patients have lost over 100 pounds on these medications. And with the state health plan's decision, they're going to be literally cut off from these medications on April 1st, this year. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it is, we're a little sad that this is happening. We think it's a little short-sighted because—
On whose part, the states or Novo Nordisk?
Both, because these medications have decreased or even prevent some of the more expensive chronic diseases like diabetes and hypertension. We were hoping and we were advocating for the state health plan to do a limited coverage. So patients who need these medications the most could have this coverage, but they chose not to. So we're really, really sad.
Well, state health officials, for their part, said that they tried to negotiate that with Novo Nordisk and for the pharmacy provider, saying, you know, essentially, what if we're just able to cut back a bit? And Novo Nordisk said, we don't want any limit on the number of people who would be able to use our drugs. I mean, what do you make of that?
It's me.
Yes, Dr. Swine.
It's probably going to have to be a decision largely from the pharmaceutical end to decrease the price of the medicines so that these folks can have access to it. It can be a more reasonable cost. Because like the doctor mentioned, if we're not preventing obesity and not preventing obesity-related conditions, then the complications of those things ultimately are going to end up being more expensive. Hospitalizations, procedures, surgeries, you know, unfortunate fatalities, you know, related to all these dialysis with kidneys. If we're not treating the root cause of all these things, it's going to end up costing everyone more money. And, you know, more is at stake.
All right, we have many more questions for our guests. Stay with us. Welcome back to our discussion about weight loss drugs tonight. We want to talk about access. And you said something that was really interesting, Dr. Rowe, about how short-sighted you feel that that decision was by both the state and by the pharmaceutical companies that produces some of the drugs. You sent me a really powerful map that shows a correlation between where there are high rates of obesity and high rates of poverty. And something tells me in those places with high rates of poverty, they don't have easy access to these types of weight loss drugs. Why is that something that concerns you?
Yes, this is the map that our team put together to show our institution's leaders that we need to pay attention to where the obesity rate is the highest. So if you take a look at the top map, it shows the obesity rate in North Carolina. If you see the eastern area, there's the highest concentration where the obesity rate is the highest. And if you take a look at the bottom map, it shows the most vulnerable population. The socioeconomic status is considered, and their language is considered, their minority status is considered. You could also see that correlation in that eastern area of the state. So we showed this map and we said, you know, we really need to make sure whatever program we develop, we need to make sure it's reaching the communities that need this service the most.
How can vulnerable populations get access to these weight loss drugs when they're so expensive, Dr. Yancy?
It's really difficult for them. It's hard for people with good insurance to obtain these medications right now because of the supply shortages. And even then, it's variable whether the insurance covers it. But the underinsured and the folks with less insurance, it's not an option. It makes it really difficult when those are the folks that have the highest rates of obesity.
And do you think that will change? Do you think that Medicaid, for instance, at some point may cover some of these drugs?
I don't see it in the near future. It would be great if that was the case.
Yeah, because it adds to all of these other potential chronic illnesses that people are dealing with, Dr. Swiner.
Right, absolutely. So what has been happening a little bit of, and I guess they're both pros and cons to that, is the compounding pharmacy industry has now kind of tapped into making their own version of these drugs, which, is more accessible for some, especially if you don't necessarily have insurance or your insurance won't cover the brand name version. But there are also the negatives because some of these medicines have not been tested as much as the FDA approved ones. And so, there are the pros and cons to it. So it's going to create more competition, and more compounding pharmacies are probably going to enter the market and have their own relatable product. But then, there are those negatives too. We're not as sure how safe long-term these medicines might be because they just haven't been studied as much. So there's a lot at stake.
Absolutely. Dr. Rowe, you wanted to add something.
Yes. There is a coalition of obesity physicians in North Carolina who advocated the Department of Health and Human Services to have at least a limited coverage for our Medicaid patients who need this drug the most. We have not heard back from them, and Dr. Yancy and we worked together to submit the letter of advocacy, but
ultimately,
no answer.
It would save the medical industry billions of dollars if there are fewer rates of diabetes and heart conditions and high cholesterol. Dr. Swiner, I do want to talk about, for just a bit, the cultural impact of these weight loss drugs. We were showing some of the TikTok videos. It's all over social media. We heard Wendy say that that's how she even learned about it in the first place. And it's interesting because they kind of arrived in a period where body positivity was on the rise as well. We were seeing models, for instance, of varying sizes on the runway and more clothing accessible to women and people of different sizes. So how does this medical breakthrough affect potentially that if people are now more interested in becoming thinner with these types of drugs?
Yeah. So what we really have to do and remember and focus on is healthy weight. So being of a healthy weight or being healthy does not necessarily mean being skinny. There are, plenty of folks that are underweight or skinny and, have medical issues. So it really is about being healthy. You can be of a particular BMI and hopefully not have any medical issues or not have to, depend on medications for different medical problems or vice versa. So we really have to remember what healthy means and don't get caught up in the social media trends of just losing weight just for the sake of losing weight. Hopefully you are doing it for a good reason. You're doing it with a certified medical provider, a physician that is helping you to manage those things and to figure out what your goals are. Are they realistic? Are they healthy goals? And how long you'll depend on these things to help you.
Dr. Swiner, Dr. Rowe, Dr. Yancy, thank you so much for your time. So much more to get to that we weren't able to, but we absolutely will in shows to come. I also want to mention we have a statement from Novo Nordisk. You can find that on WRAL.com, what they say, their responses to state health officials. If you have something to say about tonight's discussion, you can email us your comments